Tensions escalated in Delhi as a protest against the city's worsening air pollution turned violent at India Gate.
Why did Maoist posters made an appearance at the pollution protest? Is the urban infiltration that we have been talking about real? Should we worry? And what are the consequences that we need to think about? Delhi's toxic air has unfortunately triggered protests for many times. But this time something unusual happened. Posters of Maoist commander Madvi Hidma made appearance in this particular protest, where from air pollution the conversation straight away went to internal security, ideological infiltration and a lot more. Hello everyone, welcome to Vajram and Ravi's Flash News. My name is Shubhangi Singh and today we are going to understand this whole situation, that how it is a flashpoint for internal security, what exactly is the type of urban ideological infiltration that we are talking about and what are the implications associated with it. So let us start with the incident that has happened. So a protest at India Gate against the depleting AQI of Delhi especially, that has touched already 400 on the government AQI readings, and this particular protest was organized by Delhi Coordination Committee for Clean Air. Now, this protest escalated because all of a sudden there were appearances of posters and sketches of Madvi Hidma, who is a Maoist commander who was recently killed, and it was considered as a great work by our forces in removing Naxalism, especially from the whole red corridor. So, it was considered a big move here from the end of forces. Now, there were multiple slogans which were related to Madvi Hidma, and on the police itself, the protesters have used the pepper spray. Now, because of this, action was taken and police, under the Supreme Court ruling that India Gate is not a designated protest site, went and launched the FIR, went ahead and made some arrests, and this is where whole of the situation escalated. Now, the most important point here is Madvi Hidma itself, because when the concern is increasing air pollution, worsening AQI, then how come this came into the picture, and this changes the whole meaning of the protest in itself. So, first of all, let us start with understanding who exactly is Madvi Hidma. Madvi Hidma was a senior CPI, that is CPI Maoist commander, who was from Sukma, Chhattisgarh, and he was known for multiple key attacks which have been carried out, be it the 2013 Jhiram Ghati massacre in which Congress leadership was targeted, be it 2017 Burkapal ambush that happened, and multiple EID attacks pan-India. Now, he was an expert in guerrilla warfare, especially in the Bastar terrain, and this is where we get to see that he was one of the most dangerous Maoist unit. And this is where it gets concerning when all of this protest, this is being linked to him. This is why this poster which has been brought in just after almost a week of this Maoist commander's death, because when his poster makes an appearance in a protest which is about air pollution, this becomes a symbol of armed insurgency. It is not anymore a protest related to civil rights where the citizens are demanding their basic human rights. And these two things altogether fall in very different category. Now, introduction of his image itself has made this civic protest, and they turned this civic protest into a place which is of serious security consequences as well as concerns, where we are trying to change the whole scenario across the red corridor, where is the dominance of Naxalism into a growth corridor. If this is the scenario, then there has been a different direction that red corridor is working now, and that needs to be understood from the internal security perspective, and that also needs to be addressed. Now, let us talk about, when we are saying how is this internal security infiltration. So, when we talk about extremism, we have to most importantly understand in this particular scenario that how it entered the civil protest. So there are multiple ways which we can think of, but you have to understand how it is a concern also. For example, when we are talking about this very protest, we get to see a very high charge environment against the government for demanding the basic right of breathing clean air, not dying by such polluted air, correct? But this public frustration or public anger is being used in a different direction. All of a sudden it has become about that how many Madvi Hidmas will be killed. It is not about air pollution. This is where the high visibility platform of this protest, which is happening in the capital at a symbolic monument of India Gate, this high visibility platform is being used to pitch the propaganda associated with Naxalism. And furthermore, the whole idea of making this extremist side is to pitch the fact that state is oppressive and the extremist groups are the resisting force against it. Again, the whole point, I have been repeating it again and again, that these two are very different things. Where the protest was about addressing the air pollution, government taking action, government's inaction was being questioned. When this narrative came in, it became that state is the oppressor, it is killing Maoist leaders such as this, and how further this will go on. Now, further another angle that we need to explore is that why are we talking about it? Why are we emphasizing on the fact that this is different, this is different? Reason being, as soon as this protest is merged or the posters of Madvi Hidma have made appearance, the lines which exist between civic dissent and asking for civil rights and also extremist messaging, they have blurred out. It would be very difficult for a random person who will see at this, have a look at this protest to understand are they here for civic rights or they are here for a certain political messaging. Furthermore, this serves as the perfect platform where we can see ideological infiltration even without physical presence. If you talk about the Maoist units, their presence is not here, but their ideological input was present in the protest. And this simply reflects the whole attempt to expand the urban influence, and it has been documented and the internal strategy papers that we have seen of certain Maoist leaders in recent times. That it is not anymore about just guerrilla warfare, fighting through guns, it is about bringing the urban setups, urban people into the same ideological folds. Now that we have a fair idea that why this conversation has sparked, what are the concerns related to internal security that we are talking about, now this is when let us move to understand another dimension which becomes very important here, that when we are curbing such protests where the police has taken the action, it becomes a debate about freedom of expression, but in a protest where the state was being mentioned as an oppressor, internal security concerns related to Naxalism were present, there is the other side of national security which comes in. So when we talk about constitutional provisions, at one place we do have Article 19(1)(a) which gives us the right to freedom of expression. But at the very same place, we also have reasonable restrictions which can be made to ensure public order, to ensure the security of the state and prevention of any sort of incitement. And this is where the debate lies, where people want to come out and show their civic dissent, but the government might place reasonable restrictions. And this conversation, this debate always has been there, where to draw the line, where to understand that this is going beyond. But in this particular scenario, freedom of expression, especially when I am talking about ideological infiltration, will come at the cost of national security, and we wouldn't want that. Furthermore, another important dimension that here is when we are talking about free speech, then we also have to understand when we are talking about Maoist commanders' poster, is this about speech? Is this related to freedom of expression? Or it is basically an endorsement of the insurgent outfits that exist? And where do we actually get to understand where is one side of expression and when is the line will be drawn that it will become a propaganda or it will go into an armed movement, which is the line that get to decide. So this is a very difficult situation, because when we are talking about expression, it does not involve propagating or making Maoist leaders sound like they are heroes and they have been being oppressed, or to instill a different ideology here. And as I said, yes, it is very difficult to draw the line where you are expressing, where anybody or from their perspective they are seeing as propaganda. So in this particular situation, it is very important that democracies must protect the dissent, that people should be allowed to protest, people should be allowed to bring their thoughts, criticism, but it should not happen at the cost of glorification of the people who have been violent, who have done harm to the country. This is a line where we can simply understand where we put black and white separately. Now on this very note, we will be moving to understand further that how environmental protests have been the point where politicization often occurs. So whenever we are talking about, be it Indian or global protests that we have seen, especially for environment, it usually attracts student groups, NGOs, ideological collectives, opposition parties, activists. All of them you will usually see in part of environmental protest. And this becomes the very seeding ground, because once such ideological infiltration takes place, the main issue, which was over air pollution, that gets diluted. Furthermore, the company or the association or the NGO which was working towards a cost, and they might be delegitimized, and that is where this protest might be seen as just political, but not as a place where the rights are being demanded. It has a lot of potential of being polarized also, because citizens split between ideology and environmental debate. Even if you talk about the India Gate protest itself, there were so many people who were here for the environmental concern itself, here for the civic rights demanded. But how do we get to distinguish who is here for what? So that polarization also takes place, and there is hijacking of civic spaces. That means the public anger, the frustration that is present, that is used for unrelated agendas that we are seeing here. So as a result, the cleaner air, which was the main ask of this protest, has been tossed somewhere on the outside, and now the conversation is all about that what this protest was about. This protest had to be dismantled. Then there are questions related to urban infiltration, which are the people behind it, how the internal security needs to be maintained, and it has become so much more than that. On this note, further, let us talk about what are the key governance and security takeaways which are associated with this. First of all, if you talk about environmental governance, you have to understand this protest itself is an example that this is a place where this whole thing has failed. That environmental governance has shown utmost disappointment and failure. When we are talking about the capital of our country, this toxic air that we are breathing in reflects the weak coordination and also the implementation, not just between Delhi and the states, but also the center. And of course, citizens should get a place to protest when the governance fails. Furthermore, this also shows that how civic spaces remain vulnerable. For example, this is the place where we get to see that extremist groups can easily exploit the public anger, they can exploit the governance gaps, and they will also exploit the high visibility events. Furthermore, another important thing that we get to see is that this is a very right place to have a conversation about balanced state response. So if we are talking about non-violent means, especially from the public, this is also important that we prevent extremist symbolism. So we should avoid any sort of excessive curbs, especially on legitimate dissent, because if the main pillar of the democracy is the people itself, then if the people do not get to say the right things where they are seeing disappointment and failures, then the whole concept of democracy fails. And it is very important that we understand that how a protest needs to be done. So for that, SC has placed restrictions of protest sites. For example, if you want to protest, Jantar Mantar is the place. There needs to be clearer guidelines for people so that they can uphold their rights, but with law and order, with making sure that they are not harming in order to ask for their own rights itself. Now on this note, I will be ending that when we are talking about the protest that we have just seen, it just opens the gate and lets us see that how India is evolving, especially in terms of not just governance, but also the governance's challenges, the environmental crises that are in front of us, them being used by the extremist groups, the internal security threats which come with it, and that needs a lot of reconsideration and consideration by both the stakeholders, the citizens, as well as most importantly the government as well. What are your thoughts upon it? Let me know in the comment section. Leaving you with a practice question here. You can put down your answers in the comment section. The answer from previous video is here. The correct answer here is B.